It had been a very long time since the Captain Commander had had a reason to release his Bankai, and the only currently serving Shinigami who had ever seen it were the two men lying headless at Aizen's feet and the woman trying to keep Hitsugaya Toshido and Hinamori Momo alive. Speculation on its form had generally agreed that the most powerful fire-type Zanpakuto would be similar to Daiguren Hyorinmaru, the Bankai of Hitsugaya Taicho and the most powerful of the ice-type Zanpakuto. Most Shinigami expected a giant dragon made of flame, roaring fire, and reducing all of creation to ashes. They were partially correct. It did take the form of a dragon, but not a dragon of fire. The earth cracked open in between the combatants, and from the depths of the world rose the So Taicho's Bankai. It was an eastern dragon made entirely of black obsidian, the solidified form of lava. Molten magma rolled off of its back and caused scattered fires where droplets hit the surface of the execution hill. Red cracks in the black surface of its skin mirrored the many glowing scars on Yamamoto's body, and its eyes were the same simmering crimson as the pool of lava it had climbed out of. When fully emerged, Yoyu Uchigami raised its head and roared. Yamamoto himself had become even more fearsome. His spiritual pressure had increased enormously. If anyone not of the captain class had been on the battlefield, they would have been crushed. As it was, Gin, Tosen, and Ichigo were all kneeling on the ground, struggling to breathe. Only Aizen was able to stand tall, though his movements and breathing seemed stilted and jerky. Yamamoto looked at him calmly. In 1,000 years, no Shinigami has been born who is able to stand against the full force of my spiritual pressure. You are not an exception, boy. What have you done to yourself? He asked. Nothing, yet, Aizen answered. They might have been chatting over tea for all the emotion in their voices. In time, I shall destroy the barriers in myself that hold me back, and become a transcendental being. For me to succeed, however, the boy behind you must die. If I must first kill you to reach him, so be it. Don't be so cocky, infant. He did not bother with an attack phrase. He and his Zanpakuto had been together for thousands of years, and they knew each other well. The black dragon shot a stream of lava at Aizen. Just before it hit him, Aizen's Reiatsu flared. Yamamoto's eyes widened and he staggered as he felt the outer edges of a force he was barely able to comprehend. One completely different from the familiar Reiatsu of his 5th Division captain that was literally blanketing the battlefield. Underneath the stream of lava, a dome roughly the size of a tent was formed, just tall enough to shelter a standing man and wide enough to accommodate a stretched out body. The lava cooled instantly on the surface formed by Aizen's Reiatsu, and the man was covered by an overturned bowl of black obsidian. From inside of the bowl, the spiritual pressure disappeared. Yamamoto readied his sword and his Bankai. With a single swing, the bowl was cleaved in half, and Aizen stood unharmed over the headless bodies of his fellow captains. From overhead, a loud buzzing noise began. This ends now, Captain Commander, Aizen stated, taking a traditional kendo stance. In an instant, he was moving. Unlike Byakuya and Ukitake, though, Yamamoto was both far enough away and skilled enough in flash step that he was able to see Aizen's actions and respond. The black dragon interspersed itself between the two white-clad men faster than thought, but Aizen passed through the dragon without even slowing down, leaving it in 2 pieces of rock and flowing magma behind him. Yamamoto's own kendo stance brought his sword up to meet Aizen's, and their blades met with a scream and a flash of sparks. With a single twist of incredible strength, Aizen brought both of their swords up and out from between their bodies with one hand, leaving Yamamoto open to attack, and with his free hand, he shoved Yamamoto back 10 paces, just before a perfectly executed Hado 90 black coffin came down upon the spot where they had been standing. Unfortunately, said a familiar voice from the flame wall directly behind the Sotaicho, I cannot prevent the Negation from being cast any longer. As he spoke, 3 beams of golden light came down from cracks in the sky and descended onto the 3 kneeling figures. Behind the openings ripped into the sky, dozens of Menos Grande were visible. As the golden beam hit the black-clad Ryoka, his form changed to reveal Aizen, his white hair dirty and covered with blood, his glasses missing, his hair mussed, and with a deep cut in his left torso that halfway mirrored the one that he had faked having when pretending to be the young invader. The hypnosis ended. Yamamoto turned, eyes wide, to survey the battlefield. His Bankai was swiftly recovering from the attack, as the molten lava that served as the dragon's blood connected the 2 halves and hardened to form a new layer of obsidian, leaving the dragon unharmed and even longer than before. Ukitake and Shunsui were whole. Ukitake was even conscious and struggling to sit up. Yoruichi's throat was uncut, and she had also regained consciousness and had made it to her knees, staggering and cradling one hand. Byakuya and Soifan were still out cold, but were clearly alive. The only blood was on Byakuya's haori and was long dried. Everyone was struggling to breathe under the pressure of Yamamoto's Reiatsu, and with a thought he dropped out of Bankai and resealed his sword. The dragon sank back into the pool of lava in the center of Execution Hill. In time, it would cool to a perfectly circular segment of black obsidian. Illusion. All of it? Then how did he knock them? No. The man behind the blows was real. He just had the wrong face. As he turned back to confront the traitors, the duration of the Kido ran out and the black coffin was dispelled, leaving the orange-haired Ryoka that Yamamoto had believed he was protecting to fall flat on his face. Yamamoto walked over to stand by the young warrior while the assisting captains of Soul Society, accompanied by a now-conscious Komamura, flashed back onto the battlefield and, where applicable, separated to join their respective captains. Issei Nanao promptly began a healing Kido on Kyoraku's chest. Next to the captain commander, the Ryoka groaned and coughed up a mouthful of blood, muttering, "Shit." "Still alive, Kurosaki? Tell me, what does it take to kill you? It is becoming quite annoying," Aizen said genially as he straightened his hair. Beneath him, the ground cracked and the segment Aizen was standing on rose up into the air. "Bastard," the boy muttered, rising to his knees. Yamamoto's eyes lingered on the gaping wound in the boy's stomach, clearly visible under the remains of his coat, which only had the left arm and a bit of fabric left. He wasn't sure how the boy was still alive, much less still moving. The wound was not bleeding, but that might have been simply because there was no more blood to be lost. The boy's face was incredibly pale, making his vibrant orange hair seem even more shocking. "Lie down, boy. The 4th Division will be here soon, and you'll be treated. That beam of light is called Negation. The Menos use it to rescue their comrades. Once that light is cast, the area inside the light becomes a completely separate dimension and impenetrable from the outside. From the moment that light came down, Aizen had gone out of our reach." "Just from the outside?" "Do you really think that the 4th Division will be able to treat him, Yamamoto?" Aizen asked, almost idly, from his position slightly above head level. Off to the side, the ground beneath Gin's and Tosen's feet cracked and also began to rise. Ignored by almost everyone in favor of the main action, a heated exchange between two lovers began, culminating in an apology from the man leaving the woman for reasons she could not understand. "After all," Aizen continued, smiling down at Ichigo, who glared up at him from his knees, "to treat a Shinigami, the healer has to be able to sense the patient's Reiatsu. You have no one capable of treating him, or even of touching him. The essence of being transcendental, Kurosaki, is of standing alone. Goodbye, Kurosaki Ichigo. Die peacefully. I have won." Next to Yamamoto, the boy cursed. "Jisan, help me stand. I said stay down, child. Conserve your strength. He is correct. If I cannot sense your Reiatsu, it is unlikely that our healers will be able to. You will need to stay alive until we can find a way to treat you." The captain commander was startled at the familiar name from someone he had met 5 minutes ago from the wrong side of a sword, but ignored it to deliver the gruff reprimand. "Help me up or you'll lose them all!" Yamamoto blinked, but reached out to Ichigo's arm to help haul him to his feet. "And don't touch my—" But the boy was too late, as Yamamoto jerked his hand away with a hiss, his fingers burnt nearly to the bone from simply curling around his arm. "Sorry," he muttered, as he reached out to Yamamoto's shoulder with his covered arm and used it as a crutch, being careful to avoid any contact between bare skin. "Gin!" he called as loud as he could, standing with one arm over his stomach where his wound was once again beginning to bleed. "I don't know how much of the last 15 minutes you understood or what you heard, but if you go with him, you'll be lucky if he just kills you." Gin's face was turned towards him, obviously surprised at being addressed under the circumstances by someone who did not know him. "He's from the future, Gin!" Ichigo continued. He abruptly had the undivided attention of everyone on the battlefield, as a number of questions were suddenly answered. "We both are! The Hogyoku brought us back from the moment he died to the moment he first picked it up. Your plan worked, Gin. You touched his sword before he could hypnotize you. You stabbed Shinso through his heart. Your Bankai turned into dust." And Gin's eyes went wide, as Ichigo revealed knowledge of his sword that he could not know, and left a sliver in his heart, and your poison dissolved him from the inside out. It didn't kill him. He used the Hogyoku to regenerate, and then he stabbed you where you stood, and Ichigo was running out of words, looking for anything he could say to convince the man to avoid his coming death. "And Matsumoto had come after you even though she was badly wounded. You were dead when we left, and she was dying. It was a good plan, but it has no chance now that Aizen knows it's coming. The 3rd Division never recovered from losing you, Gin, and she never stopped loving you. Get out of there!" And with that, Ichigo's strength finally ran out. He fell to his knees, blood suddenly gushing from where he had been carved up as the reserves of energy drawn from deep in his soul ran out. Almost absently, Yamamoto picked up the Herody of the 1st Division captain from where it had been blown off when he released his sword, and knelt down to press it to Ichigo's stomach to try to keep his blood, what little the boy had left, inside his body. Most of his attention, and the attention of everyone else on Sokyoku Hill, was focused on the silver-haired man risen halfway to the hole in the sky. Gin's eyes were still wide. He blinked once. Well. Shit. He drew his sword. Guess that's that then. Shoot to kill. Shinso. His sword released, and he flared his spiritual energy until he was almost painful to look at, and stepped off the rock onto thin air. He stabbed at the barrier of light, funneling all of the energy surrounding him into his sword, until the circle of silver light grew, and pushed, and forced the gold away from the inside. When it was large enough, Gin dove through, and went hurtling through the air while the portal closed after him, leaving only a bare rock and an empty beam of golden light for the Menos to carry. He landed lightly on the ground. In a single flash step, Matsumoto Rangiku was in his arms. 2 more, and the swords of Hisage Shuhei and Tetsuzai Man Iba were at the veins of his throat. He ignored them, and murmured quietly to the woman in his embrace. Sorry, Rangiku. Idiot! She shook her head, face pressed against his shoulder and tears in her eyes. You idiot! Guess we'll get to play prisoner after all, eh? He looked up to where Aizen and Tosin still rode their rocks into the sky. Later, Taicho! You would have been the perfect subordinate, Gin, if you were not a treacherous snake, Aizen said dismissively from the top of the sky. He was almost at the rip in the sky when his attention was drawn to 3 specific figures from a group running up the staircase of the hill. Figures panicked from the recent, abrupt disappearance of their friends Reiatsu. Kurosaki-kun! Ichigo! Kurosaki! They sped up and raced to Ichigo's side, displacing the Sotaicho without noticing or caring about his rank. Aizen smiled to hear Orihime's frantic cry that she could not heal him. Sado Yasatura, he said, drawing everyone's attention back to him as he paused at the entrance to the Garganta. Ashida Uryu, Inoue Orihime. Who's he? The Quincy asked. You told me earlier, Aizen said, that you knew my weakness, and that you would not lose to me. Should you survive, Kurosaki Ichigo, remember, you also have weaknesses. You gather them around you and hold them close, and I know all of their names. With that, he and Tosin turned and entered into the Garganta, leaving Soul Society for good and stepping into a brave new world. Time stopped for Ichigo as he processed Aizen's threat. That was new. He would be targeting people just for their association with Ichigo, and Aizen had said once that he had been watching him since before he was born. Presumably, Aizen had known that his father was a Shinigami, and because of that, had kept track of Isshin and his family. His family. His sisters. Chad! He could feel himself fading fast, and knew that he had pushed himself too far, that he should have fallen long ago, and that he had nothing left. And Chad had always been at his back, had sworn to always protect what Ichigo wanted to protect. I'm here, Ichigo. Chad! Tell my father! My sisters! And his voice was weak, and his vision was blacking out, and his tongue was fumbling over the words. Tell them yourself, Ichigo. You're going to be fine. Don't talk. And now they thought he was pulling a dramatic deathbed speech, and fuck that! And he found the strength. My father is a Shinigami! Tell him what happened. Tell him Aizen will go after them. Tell him to get my sisters to safety! And his hand, somehow, was grabbing, not Chad, because he knew even then that he could not, but the coin on a string that had fallen out of the barred Shihakusho. Please, he whispered. Please, Chad. Remember our promise. Keep it like you always did. I will never want to protect anything more than I want to protect them. I will, Ichigo. And he heard the promise, and knew Chad understood what he did not have the strength to say, and finally let go. His hand dropped. His vision went black. Kurosaki-kun! Ichigo!